Audio. Yes, just let me try chat. Uh, oh, what the hell? Speaker. Oh, mate.
I hear you now, probably.
I've got you.
So you couldn't hear me either.
Brian, I'm going to blame you, buddy.
It was my fault. Yeah, it was totally my fault.
Ah, how are you?
Hi there. How are you?
Great
Nice
to
to meet
meet you.
you. You too, as well.
Uh,
Yeah.
how's New York?
It's sunny, which is a nice change from Berlin all that time. Very gray in Berlin during that
Yeah,
time.
very grey here in the UK,
Whew.
Europe. We deserve
Just,
it. We
just
deserve
to
it.
beg for some sun once a week is something.
Exactly. Germany, I find Germany very flat, and probably I'm told the Rhine Valley, and there are some nice areas of it,
Oh,
but
it can be quite beautiful. It's just in the north at this time of year, it tends to be much more gray, very few sun showers of any kind, sunshine of any kind. So, but if you go south, it actually works out okay.
good.
Yeah.
So, how was Samson?
Oh, it's such a great role. It's one of those things I could do a million times. It's the first role I think I've ever sung in my career where I felt like the second I started working on it, it just felt perfect. Um, it's one of those things that evidently I had heard about in years before, where you're singing roles and characters come up and you take on this new role because of course it seems like it's something you can do. It's for your voice type, but you
Yeah,
don't ever know until you start working through it how it's going to fit in your body and your throat. And it was just one of those pieces when I immediately started singing it, it felt super natural, something that I felt like I could do over and over again. And I think it was a real first for me. And I love the character. It's this powerhouse kind of character, but there's a lot of depth about him that I think is explored in the opera that's not really explored, obviously, in all the historical context or fake historical context that exists, biblical context.
yeah.
Um, I read a lot about him from that kind of background, obviously, before I went on stage with him. And, uh, they say all kinds of things like he could put two mountains together with his hands. I mean, that's pretty powerful. Obviously, in the opera, they have to dumb down his abilities a lot more, even if he is the strongest man alive at the time, if you will, kind of like a He-Man type. Not as strong as being able to move two mountains together.
I've, it must have been my year for it. I've spoken to quite a few tenors recently who, for whatever reason, got thrown into the baritone category
Mm,
when they kind of started.
yeah.
I can't believe this. You sang almost for nearly 10 years as a baritone?
Yeah, not professionally. I mean, I wasn't getting hired. So, I had never trained before. I was going to college for the first time at 20 years old after already being in college for computer science and business for a couple of years. I had never had a voice lesson in my whole life, but I always liked singing. And I'd heard about this school in New York State, kind of close to where I grew up in Westchester, New York. And they had kind of revamped their voice program. And I didn't know classical voice and opera. I just thought, oh, maybe I'll learn how to sing right for once in my life, like a real training. And I got waitlisted into that college. I mean, no training. So I go in there and not only do they say like 1/2 of 1% of you are going to have a career in opera, I was like, I don't care. I'm not going to sing opera. I didn't really think, I didn't think anything about it. But they started teaching me the technique of singing, and there's a lot that goes into singing opera, obviously, physically with your body that you normally don't do as a speaking person. Like you just don't think about it, including things that have to do with the larynx. And eventually, I learned there were a lot more things that they hadn't taught me at the school and university. But I was starting from scratch, and who knew what their capabilities are as teachers, but also what if they knew if I had the potential of actually doing it. So they started teaching me, and I was creating a sound that was darker and fake, and my tongue was kind of involved in places, and they didn't really fix that. So I started as a tenor because that's what I had always sung in choir and whatnot. And then halfway through the first year, after I did my first roles on stage as a tenor. They switched me to baritone, thinking, okay, I think you're probably going to be a baritone, like a high lyric baritone. And I did that for 8.5 years. And I just listened to my teachers. At the time, it was the teachers at the school I was at Purchase College, New York, and they just kept saying, you're a baritone. So I said, okay, I must be a baritone. I mean, if the experts say I'm a baritone, I'm a baritone. But when I was going...
What kind of material did you study then? And who did you kind of look to, baritones, to try and emulate as for guidance in that?
I mean, like the star I wanted to be when I grew up, if you will, was Thomas Samson, because he's a high lyric baritone. He would sing bel canto repertoire. I mean, he was most famous, obviously, for Barbara of Seville. But at the time I was coming through college, he had also released that album where he had that amazing aria, Vision Fugitive. I think that was actually the name of the album too. And I was a huge fan. I mean, I just adored all of the stuff he had been doing at the time. And so my career goal was to emulate that. I had high notes for days. I didn't have low notes, which was telling, but I didn't know. You know, my teachers just said, "Oh, you'll get that."
I hope your teacher's watching, because he screwed up.
It happens, you know.
And I can totally understand you being influenced by Thomas Samson. I think probably one of my greatest nights in opera, Covent Garden. He sang in Traviata with a friend of mine, Joseph Calleja,
yes.
And Rennie Fleming, and it was just incredible.
Good cast.
He has amazing stage presence, Thomas Samson. So
he really does. He also knows how to deliver text in a way that's really beautiful. Especially, I mean, if you ever see him do a recital, it's obviously one of the greatest things he still does to this day. I'm a good friend with Tom, actually. So now, funny enough. But so anyway, I switched to tenor in 2000, I want to say 8, 9. And it was only because I was away from the teachers from the college for a long time, and I'd still been warming up to high C and didn't have a low notes for days. And I was like, you know what, maybe I need to think about this, because I had been auditioning as a baritone for young artist programs. I mean, I remember auditioning for people like Peter Cazares, who was running the Seattle Young Artist Program in America. And he would say, Brian, are you sure you're not a tenor? And I'd say, my teachers think I'm a baritone. And, you know, so, you know, you listen to the quote unquote experts, and there are a lot of people out there who really aren't experts. I think it was questionable with me only a little bit more because the color of my voice, even now, as a tenor, has some darkness, some richness. So there's a little bit of a baritonal quality, especially if I'm singing something like Samson, which actually sits lower than 90% of the music I sing. So yeah, you know, it's a mistake that's happened a lot. I mean, Domingo sang baritone. A lot of tenors started off as baritones, especially because tenors are, you know, fewer and far between. Men with high voices are rare, obviously, and a lot of people don't know how to teach them. It's a different beast.
You have a curious voice, and I mean that in the most nicest way. And it's funny that you should say how you're noticing changes within your voice. I mean, predominantly you're considered to be, check my notes here, like a spinto.
Yeah.
Most people will say Brian Jagde is a spinto tenor. But you know, you kind of look at your roles. I mean, you came pretty light, right across the board. Traviata, Butterfly, Bohème, pretty much on the lyric side.
Yes.
You know, Pala, Turandot, Manon, Lascaux, Don Jose. That's definitely the spinto area. And then Don Alvaro and La Forza, Samson, which you've just done, and Floristan, which are definitely, in anybody's book, pretty dramatic roles.
Yes.
So you've encompassed quite a wide gamut there of the tenor roles. I mean, what's left? Wagner? I don't know.
Well, you know, I will touch on Wagner eventually. I've been saying no to Wagner since the beginning because, well, just in general, I believe in having a long career and putting that career on a certain trajectory. When I started singing tenor is when I did Bohème right away. I mean, my first role as tenor was Bohème. I skipped over, sadly. Like, I wish I could still go back and do a Lucia, you know. But I never got to do that because it probably would have happened in my 20s when I was singing baritone, you know. So yeah, I started with the lightest rep at the time that was right for my voice, which was Bohème. Don José even was really in the same kind of time period, and Butterfly, those three. And then Tosca. And I did a lot of that for a good period of time. But I've also sung Bacchus, which I love to sing. Florestan was supposed to happen. It didn't end up happening because of COVID. But it will, I'm sure. We have it on the schedule in the future. I'm sure it'll happen. And then Trovatore I got missed out on because of COVID. So yeah, these are all dramatic spinto tenor roles. And of course, I'm looking forward to going into Wagner in the future. I've already had, like I said, enough offers for it. But in America, especially as a singer, especially in the last 20 years, it feels like you couldn't put that on resume. You couldn't put Wagner while singing Tosca. And they see you as a Wagner tenor, then they only start giving you that. And then there's lesser opportunities for a young tenor, actually, in a way, because they think, oh, maybe he's too young for that, you know, maybe he shouldn't be doing that. So the offers you get, you may do, but then that's it. And then you don't get any Cavaradossi offers anymore. They have to put you in a box. But as a European artist, I find that there's more opportunities for European artists because the countries are so much closer together with such a wider variety of cultural influence. You know, it allows you to switch back and forth between those reps. So had I been a European-born tenor, who knows what would have happened? But, you know, that's just not my life.
And while we're touching on Don Alvaro, congratulations, because Jenna told me hopefully it's going to be announced this week. It's
announced on Wednesday, yeah.
You're going to be coming to the Met. That's fantastic. Who are you singing with? Who are you singing opposite there? Do you know?
So far, I believe the only person I know is the soprano. It's Lisa Davidson.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the beginning of what I know. I think they'll announce. The Met's always been very, you know, close to the chest about this kind of information. In fact, they're one of the only opera houses I can't find out, you know, every single detail about the cast, crew, director, production before I sign a contract. So, but I kind of make it a rule of mine to do that for anywhere else in the world. But it's a new production that's just premiered in Poland. And it's definitely new. It's definitely different. It takes place, I believe, in kind of a post-apocalyptic time period. So it's a very different Forza than people have seen in the past.
It's funny you just mentioned a few minutes ago about how things may or may not have been different had you been a European tenor. Mm-hmm. And obviously I was speaking, as you know, to Greg Cundy recently.
Yeah.
And how, you know, we've been blessed really over the years with great American tenors. And we were reeling all the old names going back to his period. And yeah. I thought it was nice that when he was speaking of kind of like the new wave, the new guys on the block, he actually named you first.
I saw that. It was very kind. You know, I have a lot of respect for Greg. I've met him only a couple of times, but he's
a phenomenon. He's an absolute phenomenon, singing to the standard that he is at his age.
At his age?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's just beyond belief. And you know what? He's a lovely man. And if you ever do get to meet him or speak to him to any appreciable degree, I know that he will gladly give you lots of advice. He's taken another tenor who actually vocally sometimes you remind me of an English-Italian tenor called Freddie Di Tommaso.
Freddie. Yeah, I know Freddie.
You guys, I can see some
trajectory.
Yeah, certain things between you two guys, and
Freddie's a great guy too. Actually,
he is. Yeah, I interviewed him last year. He's a great. He's quite similar to you in background. He grew up working in a restaurant in Tunbridge Wells, not far from where I am today. But yeah, just a down to earth guy, and I reckon I also hear a little bit of John Vickers in some of your stuff as well. You know?
Oh wow, that's an honor too.
I mean, another great tenor.
And I'm following his kind of path of trajectory a little bit too. I mean, he did all the roles that we just spoke of I mean, easily, and eventually I'll be doing Otellos as well and stuff like that, which he also did. So yeah, it's exciting. And Freddie is a really great artist who's, I mean, just had a huge success in the last, I mean, few years, just blown up. And
Absolutely.
Couldn't be happier for the guy. He's literally one of the nicest guys you ever meet.
He is. He's a lovely guy. I'm hoping to go and catch up with him.
You should. You should.
Yeah, I interviewed him as I'm speaking with you, and yeah, I must go up to Tunbridge Wells and buy him a drink.
I like what Greg said in the interview with you, actually, about the career and about what he said to Freddie about just taking it one step at a time. Don't rush. There's no reason to rush. I followed that motto too. I mean, literally from the beginning, like I said, I've said no more than I've said yes.
I always say to everyone I speak with, I refuse to accept I'm not a tenor. I sing in the bath. The problem is I have no upper register. I need to get some voice. I'm never going to sing anywhere, but I have to get some voice coaching.
Why not?
And it's ironic that you said, you know, I started out with Bohème, which is actually my favorite opera.
Gorgeous.
But, jeez, I could probably, at a push, over a course of a long period of time, sing the whole opera, but I could not hit that top on Cajolina Menina for my life. My life depends on it.
Well, you know, there have been tenors in the past who have taken it down not only a half step, but I've even heard it a whole step low, which is really rare, really, really rare.
I mean, I think it's written as a C, or it might actually be a B.
It has a high C.
It is a C.
I've heard it as a B.
And yet a B struggles for me as well, but I'm pretty sure I'm not a baritone. But I refuse to accept it. What the hell? I only sing in the bath anyway. Much to my wife's annoyance. So having finally established actually you're a tenor, this is the career that you're going to go into. Who did you look to for inspiration? Which tenors really got you going to thought, wow, that's amazing, that's how I want to sound? Or if you wanted to have your own sound, but you still took inspiration from them, who would you go to? Who would be like your top? It is a tough question.
A tough question in a couple of ways, because when I switched to tenor, I found one teacher who I was very lucky to find in New York, who, you know, wasn't associated with any universities and was recommended to me. His name's Michael Paul here in New York, and I still study with him to this day. But we were so focused on technique, and he was such a believer in my ability to start working really quickly. I mean, I literally was doing auditions like 2.5 weeks after studying with him, and switched to manager with a manager 2 weeks after him as well. Like it was really very quick. I mean, 6 weeks later, I was getting into Merilla for next summer, which is the Young Artist Program in San Francisco. And so it all started rolling very quickly. I didn't have a lot of time to think, who do I want to sound like? Although, if I had to choose like one tenor who, when he was on, was like the epitome of perfection to me, it's Giacomini. And ironically enough, wow. I was introduced to Giacomini by my teacher, who played a recording of him to kind of explain to me some of the reasons why he teaches the way he teaches. And so a lot of the technique I'm getting is based upon the technique that Giacomini sang in, which is all body set technique, very little using the throat. In fact, I think when you see Giacomini failing anytime, cracking or whatever, it's just as he got into his throat too much here and there, which, you know, we're all human. Or it was coming up, you know, and this is something I talk about technically with young singers all the time. But Giacomini is my epitome. I mean, if you go on YouTube, I wish I could have heard him live, because I never did, because my teacher tells me you don't hear on the videos so much of the trumpety forward sound that he cut with. You hear a lot of the dark, richer sounds that he sang with, which of course were there. But when people listen to these recordings, they don't even get half of the point and the amount of resonance that was coming out of his instrument. And I only wish I could, you know, but all I can do is try and sing as legato as he does. I mean, the way he can go between words and the phrasing and the color of the instrument is stunning. My favorite recording to listen to on YouTube is any one of his Chenier aria recordings, which are just insanely powerful and rich. And you don't hear that from anybody else. I mean, nobody else who sang the role sang it like that. You can go and listen to Corelli's version of that aria, or any of the greats, honestly, and you never hear that kind of beauty of tone and the beautiful legato that came with it. It's a challenging role in the first place. That and Don Alvaro, I mean, there's an amazing recording of him from Verona doing it. I tried to beg Verona to do a production of Forza, but they don't do stuff like that anymore. They only do the big sellers these days, the top 6 operas, 7 operas that they can perform that they know will sell. Sadly, I hope they can expand it a little bit in the future. But I want to add that Giacomini premiered this production I'm doing of Pagliaccio in Rome with Daniel Oren when it was premiered. It's a Zeffirelli Rome opera production of Pagliaccio, and I'm doing it in like a month. And it's my debut in the role, and they're doing it obviously in connection with the Zeffirelli celebration of his, I think it's his 100-year celebration or something like that, or what it would be. And I'm getting to do it with the original conductor of that production in the original place it was done there. So and that Giacomini did it. It's kind of like a little bit of a homage, if you will.
I did, and I know I'm going to sound unprofessional now because I can't recall what he sang. I actually did see Giacomini once live in the Royal Albert Hall in London. And it would be in the mid to late 90s.
Okay. So still singing pretty well. Heavy schedule in Asia.
He didn't on this night.
Oh no,
he wasn't the principal. Well, I say wasn't the principal. I'm trying to remember what the event was. I think it was something like Night of 1,000 Stars or something like this. One of these things that and actually the tenor that I went to see was Jose Cura, the Argentinian, who was amazing back in those days.
Oh yeah.
And Giacomini was there, and I cannot remember the aria he sang. It may have been one of the arias to Chenier, one of the arias to which and he cracked quite badly. and I know that he was distressed about it. He didn't come he wouldn't come and take a curtain bow at the end of it. He was very clearly, like you said, that you are human. And
the funny part about it is back then, people, all those guys cracked. All those guys failed. Nowadays, we have a lot less sympathy and understanding from people when they have a bad night. I mean, you can have one bad night and that could be really bad for your career. It's a very different feeling. And also, of course, there's this online presence. Everybody with a phone can record you and send it out to the internet, or we have.
And they do.
I feel bad for friends of mine when they're trying to debut a role and they go to a smaller house, and then also it's broadcast for the whole world to hear for their first time running through a role when, there's no safe space anymore. You need that. You need to try things out. You have to be willing to make mistakes actually to be a great opera singer. It's kind of part of the business, and there's a lot of less sympathy when it comes to being able to do that. I mean, I've had off nights too. I mean,
I think
everybody has.
I think the internet has a lot to answer for, Brian.
You're right.
It's brought opera into. I mean, I, and I'm sure you have. I mean, actually speaking to Freddie, he actually, I wouldn't say learned his craft. That would be wrong, but he certainly made a major contribution to his craft, studying the tenors of old.
Yes.
On YouTube, because people upload them there, and what a fantastic tool. By the same token, I find, particularly the opera world, seems to attract. I'm trying to think of a suitable epithet. No, arseholes. I can't really think of a better kind of word for them. Someone will put a recording up, and then you'll get this whole sequence of.
Yeah.
Well, you clearly haven't listened to Bjorling, because it blows this one out of the water, and someone else will say, Bjorling, no, you need to listen to Pavarotti's version, or the monocles, and these people are really vicious and unbelievably nasty. And
It's one of those double-edged swords, actually. We need those people because they're big fans of opera and they keep coming, thank God. But it also is a double-edged sword because, they keep trying to compare you to this person or that person instead of just kind of trying to enjoy or analyze this person for themselves. I wish that people would do that more. But also, we also have audiences that are talking about these things without having never heard these people live. They're talking about having recordings of Björling and comparing them to somebody singing now. And, hearing something on a recording and actually having been there, hearing that person live is a very different subject.
Oh, massively. So, I'm speaking with Eileen, I think, in a few weeks' time.
Oh, she is so lovely.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most important voices from America in my generation. So I really hope you can talk. No, I mean, look at the color of that instrument. It's so beautiful.
She sang. Do you know what was bizarre? She sang Mimi.
Yes.
And she sung it in a way I've never heard any other soprano sing it.
I said the same thing.
So much sotto voce through it, and I thought, she just so tender and soft, and she managed to get over the audience, even though she was beautiful. It was
talented. I couldn't adore her more. She's definitely one of the coolest people in the industry. And when I heard her do Bohème at the Met, it changed the way I perceived the role because it was sung in a way. The phrasing choices were different. She wasn't breathing in the same place as every single soprano previous. She was doing things in a way that really inspired me. I love her so much, and I hope I get to do more work with her in the future. But she has to start singing heavier rep.
So yeah, you were right. You can never, ever. It's difficult to judge a voice until you've ever been and sat there live, and it's so unique and so different to watching a recording.
Absolutely. You just have nowhere to hide as a singer.
Oh,
and also the way they're recording with digital recording technology nowadays. If you go back and listen to anything that Domingo did or previous, we're talking analog. We're talking a distance from the microphones. We're talking about in the house microphones. So you get the overtones. Whereas nowadays, people are body mic'd or the mics are at the front of the stage. And for voices of size, all you're going to hear is a wobble because it can't pick up all of that resonance. It's just impossible. So I've had a lot of conversations with houses, but it's unfortunately become a very unfruitful conversation. I wish they would take more consideration into how we're produced and what we're putting out into the public, because I feel like it's actually a deterrent in a way. Sure, you have people who come to the theaters and they'll see HD video of you singing, and it's more accessible in that way, which is great. But they're not really getting anything close to what you really sound like. And I wish they would do a better job of finding a way to do that. But of course, that costs money. So, that's tough in this industry. I think smaller voices tend to record much better when it comes to these kind of live performances because they have less of a limiter on their instrument. And so you'll see some casting that's done a little bit like that, that's built for HD more than is built for the opera house. I mean, imagine being at the Met and it's a 4,000 seat opera house almost. We're talking huge. And you need voices that can fill that house for the audience. But for the HD, you really don't. No. You could record someone from 2 feet away or, like I said, on their body. Yeah. And it's a different experience. Not to mention, of course, the acoustic thing about hearing a live voice from the house as opposed to being in a movie theater where, you have all these speakers coming around at you. It's just, there's nothing visceral about it being in the movie theater. When you're in real life, you feel the voice, you feel the instrumentation. And I think that's what makes opera worth going to in the first place. I mean, you really get a sensorial overload from everything. It's not just what you hear, it's what you feel.
I agree entirely with that. And it's curious that you said about how technology can impact how voices sound and the different methods of recording. And I've always found it bizarre that every kind of certainly 20th century tenor always aspired, always still used Enrico Caruso as the benchmark to try and attain. But my God, look, let's be honest. Yeah, I know you can, if you really listen to some of those recordings, you do get moments of absolute beauty. You think, oh, wow, yeah, I can hear that. But what a awful, sounds like his head's in a dustbin, and, you know, the cat's all scratching it to get inside with him. And it's just awful. And you think, who the hell, you find it very difficult as I guess, a non-opera lover to listen to that and think, who the hell would listen to that and think, that's the guy I want to sound like?
Well, everybody at that time was listening. I mean, when it was recorded, of course, that was the only way to record. You know, they were singing directly into this.
This awful wax thing.
Exactly. So, I mean, that luckily developed into something a little bit more. I think, again, the best audio recordings, even produced recordings by record labels, I feel still are even better with when they did it with, I mean, nowadays you see a lot of recording companies, they'll pre-record the orchestra track so they don't have to spend as much money, and you sing in a booth over a recording. So there's no live experience, there's no changes, there's no, you don't, when you're on stage with an orchestra or in a room recording with one, you are in a community. You're all together making that music. They're listening to you, you're listening to them. But if it's pre-recorded and you're in a booth with headphones, how do you really record opera that way?
Yeah,
you know, it's just because it's more affordable. And I see the side of it where they're saying, well, if we want to make recordings, this is the way we have to do it because we can't afford to do it any other way. But at the same time, how is that increasing our audience and our audience awareness? If someone hears a bad recording, are they really going to come hear somebody sing in the opera house? I don't know.
I don't know. There's a passage where we could wander down and speak forever, Brian.
For sure.
More than one, including by his own admission, Joe Calais has expressed concerns about the future of opera and the audiences and
I feel bad for I mean, we can talk about it for a little bit more, but I feel bad for the young kids coming up. I mean, you know, I always try to do my best to advise singers coming up about the actual cost and expenses of doing this. You know, I take lessons all the time, and this is like an investment in my career, right? But you know, the educational preparation needed, the financial resources needed, and then, you know, we talk about an industry where they couldn't raise the fees for the last 30 years. So it's not going with the cost of living. You know, so you have to work more often maybe than even the old time singers had to. And obviously you're not rich after you finish anything. I mean, none of us normal singers out there, even the top 100 singers in the world, except for maybe the top 3 famous people in the world, are making anything more than possibly even a Met chorister. You know, so, you know, you don't know. I mean, in the end, I don't know how much they make exactly. And of course, they have a different tax bracket and stuff like that. But, you know, after expenses, I try to make it a real thought process for young singers about how they're going to be able to do this career in the future, especially when, like I said, if people aren't going to change the fee structure to cover a cost of living, it's going to be a very hard challenge for them. I feel bad for them coming up in it. I'm lucky to be already working in this industry. And especially with COVID, you know, all my colleagues who didn't have work already planned after COVID or during COVID, you know, they're really struggling to get back into this industry where, like I said, one gig isn't going to change your financial life at all. No. You hope it builds on this, and it builds. But I feel really worried for the next generation of singers when it comes to, you know, it's like if you were the top, say you're like one of the top 100 basketball players in the NBA or the top tennis players in the world, you're guaranteed to have enough income to do pretty well and live a kind of very, very well, you know, financially planned life. And I think it used to be like that for opera singers. I mean, you talk about the times of Pavarotti and Domingo and Carreras, and even, you know, you talk about Renee Fleming and that generation, the Thomas Hampson generation. You still had that, but they're still in this tail end of this part of the generation. And I think this last 20 years has been really hard on opera singers in general. And I don't know what houses plan to do about that. I don't know what theaters plan to do about that, because I think in some ways it feels like they're willing to just burn through singers and just move on to the next thing that they can afford, as opposed to worrying about longevity. And I think it's just something, it's a big concern in the industry. The business side of things is really not fun. So you have to really love what you're doing. You have to really, really want to be an opera singer to do this.
And I also think that there are some people who are in the industry, speaking with another American, Johnny Tettleman.
Yes.
And he touched on this, as has a couple of sopranos, Carmen Giannatasio and Alexandra Kurzak I spoke with last year. They kind of touched on the same thing about there are people, there needs to be some kind of change amongst the people who work in the industry, not the artists, the directors, the producers, because there is a tendency to kind of lean towards a somewhat, on occasion, bizarre. Somehow the opera isn't enough. They have to do something dramatic and radical with it to somehow try and, I assume, ostensibly to attract a different audience. But for instance, we had Jonathan Tettleman singing a beautiful Tosca in a most bizarre staging. I've only seen it on DVD where he's in the snow and there's bloody corpses everywhere and kind of, and again, same opera, Roberto Alagna and Alexandra Kurzak withdrew from this bizarre staging of one towards the end of last year because the directors felt the need to introduce some element of shock or obscenity, or to somehow radically change what the composer had in mind. And I think that there are some, I am speaking with people, they are expressing concerns that there is some of that in the industry, and that
it used to be that, why did audience come to the opera, right? They came because they wanted to see this star, this star, this star. They didn't come because they were worried about what director was going to come in from a different industry. Like if you get a movie director, which it's worked a couple of times, don't get me wrong, but or even a Broadway director, which again has worked before, but it doesn't necessarily bring in a Broadway audience. You're not going to expand your audience in that way. But if houses aren't promoting the people who are on stage, who the audience wants to get to know. They want to know everything. When I talk to audience members, they want to know everything about how the sausage is made. They want to know how I got here, what I'm doing next, how my technique works. They're really fascinated by these kind of things. And I think if houses were to focus more on the artists on stage, I think they'd have audiences again in a way that they haven't had for some time. And it might be, I don't know if it's too late. I don't know. But the point is, they could build us up. They used to create stars. They're the ones who made people stars. They would say, look who we've got now. And this is what they've done, and this is what they can do. But, going back to what I was saying earlier, imagine asking any of those top 100 basketball players or tennis players to have a second job because that's what you need to live. What we do as opera singers is freaking hard. It's really challenging. It requires a lot of technique that you never will be perfect at. I get up and I sing every day. I warm up. It's like going to the free throw line and shooting 100 free throws every day for Michael Jordan, like that. Now imagine that. Now ask Michael Jordan to take an IT job while trying to do that job perfectly. He probably wouldn't have been as good a basketball player. So what are we going to do about that? How are we going to help these next generation have the quality and integrity that we want on that stage, but also be able to afford doing it? I think that's going to be the hard crux about the next generation of singers. And even in my generation, you'll see that that's something that's still a problem. So hopefully we can fix that.
Let's hope. We do share something in common.
Tell me.
We both sing "You Infinitely More" better than me. Okay.
Oh, I'm sure.
But we're both pretty big guys. We both like the gym. I train pretty hard, mainly because I'm a martial arts instructor.
Oh,
and
cool.
I'm trying to protect my ligaments and tendons. And I know you work out pretty hard as well. And that's something that Freddie also mentioned, and he spoke as of other singers about how important actual physical hard work is, just to sustain the voice, to maintain the breath, and to do what you do. It's
Yeah.
not just turn up and sing. You have to really work not just on the muscles that make you sing, but to be really good, it would appear that you have to develop your whole body as well to a degree. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think a healthy physique is okay. I mean, it didn't stop some of the greatest opera singers from being good opera singers. And so there's a lot of subject that, I mean, this has come up a lot in America in general, the subject of health and not quote unquote fat shaming. But about 20 years ago in this industry, we definitely started seeing a lot more thin people on stage, some of which had maybe less talent even than some of the bigger people who should have been on the stage. So I don't know that we should be, hiring it for any reasons of looks always. It should always be the voice first, I think, when it comes to a singer. I mean, that's my opinion. I would rather hear an amazing performance by somebody who couldn't move than somebody who could do jumping jacks on stage while singing kind of not so great. You know what I mean? So if I have to choose, but going back to the working out, yeah, I worked out a lot for a long period of time. Lately, I haven't been able to. In fact, I had my back. Really, I had some issues with my back recently, and the production I was doing of Samson was done by a movie director, and it definitely increased the physical demands of the character. And the guys, who do the extra stuff, the ones who push you around and beat you up and stuff, sometimes you have to make sure that they can't take it so seriously. But lately I haven't been able to lift as much as I really love to. In fact, I'm just getting back into the gym, and I'm actually starting to do more yoga and stretching type exercises. And I would love to even pick up a martial art, because I think that would be really good for the body and keeping it limber. Technically speaking, as long as you work your lower core and understand how the voice works, you should be able to sing. When you're singing, if you're strained here and tired here all the time in the voice, in the box, in like the throat, something's probably wrong with your technique. I get tired, but mostly I get tired in my body. But the day after a show, I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I should have stretched last night after the show. There are things that are more costly to me because I'm singing from what would be considered the classic Italian school of singing, which is all from the lower abdomen.
Yeah.
All my singing comes from down there. When I'm going up to a high note, I'm not thinking, let's reach for that high note. I'm thinking, let's go down.
Oh man, so that must be where I'm going wrong, Brian. We have to have a voice.
Well, you're not
that's
the only
where I'm
one.
going wrong.
Think about all these, like I said, think about all these students paying hundreds of dollars an hour for lessons and not being taught anything about using the body when they sing.
Yeah. And
their tongues are going back into their throat and all these things. And it's not so complicated. Like if you tell somebody this and you work on it, you can be an opera singer. In fact, we were born opera singers. We just learn how not to do it from the day we're born. We're born being able to create as much sound as possible in an emergency to call for mom. That is why our babies are so loud. But, as soon as we start talking like we do now, especially in America with our way of using the voice and accents, not so much Italian where they're forward and, it's a little different. It's a lazy way of using the voice for all those years. So when you start taking lessons to sing opera at whatever age you start, 18, 20, 25, whatever age you start, you have to retrain your body how to do something it knew how to do, but not for a really long time. And it takes a long time to undo 20 years of studying something wrong.
I've never heard. That's a fascinating insight, actually.
Well, think about it. Our bodies are machines. They're born.
I agree. I'm happy to agree with you 1,000% on the mechanics of production of the voice, but unfortunately, I happen to also believe that you're kind of born with it to a degry. You can't. Yeah, unfortunately.
I mean, if you can't sing a tune, you can't sing a tune.
I loved to an nth degree Luciano Pavarotti, but I don't think he ever worked hard a day in his life after the age of about 36. It was just a natural God-given talent that he had. Yeah, I do.
He had an earlier start. Think about also like pop culture was very different then. Pop music, even the old timey singers, even the guys in the generations before me, just before, even Tom Tamson's generation or Luciano's generation, they were listening to a different style of music even,
Yeah,
and it wasn't falsely created. I mean, nowadays half the people on stage are lip syncing with themselves.
yeah,
You go to a live concert and you're not really hearing the live person's voice, so it's
no,
always kind of perfect and produced, and they wanted to add all this dancing. It's just a different thing. People
yes.
pay hundreds of dollars to see someone pretend to sing.
Which is the argument I always use, and I've always mentioned it infinite times, in conversations with opera people. Yeah, I have friends who say to me, how the hell do you like opera? It's such a niche, rich man's thing. And I come from the north of England. You can't get any more working class than me. And these people are the ones that have probably wouldn't bat an eyelid at paying £500 to go and see Ed Sheeran on a big screen. And they think the idea that, oblivious to the fact that for a few pounds, few dollars, you can get some kind of a seat in the opera house. But yeah, it's always been.
I mean, literally, people complain about the prices of opera when they pay that much to go see any concert. I mean, you can pay that much to see almost anybody.
Exactly.
In reality, I wish we could charge more, but obviously you want people to have accessibility. And obviously there are groups of people who don't have, $300 or £300 to spend on a ticket. And I feel like it would be nice if we could also always reserve a certain part of the audience for the people who really need it and they could prove financial, strain or something. There's got to be a way to help people who really need it to get into the theater, because we love a good audience, no matter what level of finances they have, whatever status they have in the real world doesn't matter to us. We just want them to be there and be happy to be there. I always talk about this too. The audience the audience has a role. We feel the audience's energy when we're on stage. If you're not happy to be there, we know. And I could say, like, a best example was, like, I was singing at San Francisco Opera on election night in 2016 in America, and it was elected that night, and that audience was not happy about that. A lot of the world wasn't happy about that one, but I digress.
Let's not go down that route.
Yeah, let's not do that. But the point is, after intermission is when we found out. And halfway through the show, the audiences, whoever stayed, because a lot of people left, whoever stayed they were really nervous. You could feel the anger and the upsetness and the sadness and I never felt it more than that night, I have to say. Yeah.
We live in a divided world, my friend.
Especially here,
And it forever seems to be increasingly diverse, and indeed here in the UK as well. It's not just in America. I'm going to show
Italy.
Yeah.
Italy just know how to do
yeah, I think many countries in Europe. That's another topic for another day. Let's not go down that route.
We can talk about politics next time.
Oh wow, let's not go down that route at all.
A lot of the greatest things that have ever been created were people mixing cultures, mixing ideas. I mean, that's how we come up with new things. This is because we say, oh, wow, they're doing this way. We never thought of that. Let me try mixing our thing with their thing and seeing if it's better or if it works or if it's worse. Artists. I mean, also, we always forget art is meant to inspire all kinds of emotion. It's not supposed to always make you happy.
Of course.
You go to a museum, you could go in front of any number of paintings and it could make you cry. It could make you feel angry. It can make you feel like this is a piece of shit on the wall. Like, you have all kinds of emotions, but that's the job of the painting. The artist isn't worried whether you love it for the reason that you hate it or if you love it because you love it. They don't care about that. They just want you to feel something. And I think that's what we're trying to do on stage, is make people feel something. One way or the other. Even if we're off on voice that night, we try to give it our all in another way.
Look, back to business, because it's getting late, and I know I could speak to you all night. It's been a fantastic time chatting to you. You are premiering Don Carlo.
Yes, in Rome, in London, this coming end of June, early July.
Yeah. How's preparations going for that? And
It's
how do you see this role? This is the first time you've sung this role. Am I correct in
it's
that?
the first time, and it's actually currently the only time I have it on my schedule, ironically. It's a role that I never knew if I would do, especially because I keep getting hired to sing much heavier roles, if you know what I mean, vocally heavier, not lengthy, but heavy. This role has actually taught me a lot so far. That's one thing I love about taking on different roles is that you learn something about your own voice. When I'm approaching Don Carlo, I'm thinking longer phrasing, much longer phrasing, even than I've heard from other people when I sing it. I need to find a way. It's not about conservatively using my instrument more. It's more about the sentence structure and really trying to, give that real full, because there's a lot of breaks in music that are written because maybe you need to breathe, but also because composers had to fill a 4/4 line bar, so they put a rest in or a comma in or whatever, and they build the music within that framework. But sometimes what you need to do is before I look at the music, I was looking at all the text and reading the lines in their entirety. And there are some times where, almost the entire aria in the beginning of the opera is commas. There's a few sentences, obviously sentence endings, but there's a lot of times where the musical phrase could be longer and could be better. And you see that with other characters. If you look at the most famous recording of Rodrigo's people singing the arias, and they try and do that whole phrase in one thing, and it's always super impressive and beautiful, but it's also good for the sentence structure, ironically. So I'm looking at things in a different way with Don Carlo.
Something I noted, you have very good breath control.
Thanks.
You're able to spin out a wonderful line, and sometimes I think he needs to take a breath in a minute. Again, I have to learn how to do that. I'm getting old. That's my problem at times.
I'll tell you, the secret is a technique that's all about the body.
I know. It's the diaphragm, 100%. Breathe here. And there's a great mixed martial artist called Bas Rutten. I don't know whether you've ever heard him. He's Dutch. And he sells these, what he called the O2 trainer. It's for martial artists. And
I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about.
I tried to do that, actually. I tried to look and see if I could increase mine. It worked for, not really. It didn't do anything for me because I'd already been doing quite a bit of breath control for a really long time. But I saw that. I bought one of them.
It's just okay, you know exactly what it is. And I'm going to get one because, I find my stamina's hard when I'm training, and I want to increase my stamina. But it occurred to me, doing the research into it, about how it actually focuses you to breathe lower down rather up here. And I'm thinking, I wonder if that's a great, for classical singers, that must be potentially a great aid. I must try that.
No, it's smart. I think it limits how much you can blow air out. And
you can fit different. It's just
it has adjustables.
Yeah. I think I'm going to try that. I have to be honest. And say, Don Carlo is probably my least favorite Verdi opera, but that's probably just a personal thing. It just hasn't grabbed me the way that Trovatore has or Traviata has. And I've seen Kaufman in the role.
No, it's a challenging opera for different reasons. Out of all the Verdis, it was definitely the most music composed because of the fact that the two versions and then the two different versions of each version. And, I think I read somewhere that out of all the Verdi operas, it has the most written music by Verdi included, if you include all the different scenarios.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean anything about the storyline. I think you really need luckily in this version I'm doing is the Fontainebleau scene, because if you don't have that scene, you really don't see any of the possible romance between Elisabetta and Don Carlo. So then you're starting in a place that's already happened. And I feel like you've kind of missed out on the part that shows where they actually have real love possibly for each other. I think dramatically it's a different type of role. But with all the roles I do, I always try to look at a few different things. One of the most important is, what are you insecure about? What is it that's holding your character back from getting what it wants? And in this scenario, it's laid out for you quite well with Don Carlo. Obviously, it's a complicated story of competing with his father and for the same woman, and not having any power. to do anything about that.
Yeah.
So, but he's a weak character a lot of the time. And so I try to find because he's generally considered a weak character, because he complains a lot about the fact that he's heartbroken. And I mean, almost all the text he sings is kind of like, I'm miserable, I'm so sad. I mean, it's kind of a weak personality trait to have as a character, no positivity at all. And relying on this one person to kind of, be a brother, to him and help him maybe achieve what he wants, but then not really succeeding. And, so I try to, in a character like that, my goal is to try and find the strengths of the character. And it's challenging. It's really challenging. I mean, it's also based on a real person, but I mean, the story is obviously fictional. So
of course,
it's going to be an interesting challenge. I look forward to it.
Change it up. Bring something in it. I
want to bring something.
Bring the fuck you attitude into it. That's the idea to do it. That's like, who the hell is this Don Carlo? Let's just do it. Go on, do it, Brian, please. Do it.
Yeah. What am I going to do that's different than other singers?
Yeah, that's exactly.
I don't listen. Like I said, I don't really listen to any other singers these days. I try not to compare and contrast myself to other people. I focus on what I can do and what I know what I can do. And then maybe after I've learned the role, maybe I'll go and listen and say, oh, that guy tried this here. Maybe I can see if that's something I want to try and put into my performance. But if it, I don't focus on that. I don't focus on any ideas of other people's interpretation. I try to bring what I can best to the piece. And if I can do that, that's my best.
Which is all you can do, my friend.
Yeah. What else is there?
Which is all you can do.
I'm only as good as I am.
Well, fortunately, you're very good.
Thanks.
What would you like to try in the future that you haven't done? Is there anything out there you think, you know what, I'd like to do that?
Oh, there's so much. It's hard because I know I'll be doing a lot of the things I would say. For instance, I know that I'll be doing Chenier. I know that I'll be doing Fanciulla. I know that I'll be doing Otello, which I think is a beautiful, amazing role. I mean, gorgeous. But talk about insecurity. I mean, talk about it. The guy is convinced that his wife's cheating on him when she's not. He doesn't, maybe because of the way he's treated as a person, he doesn't think he deserves someone like her. But that's insecurity on his own part, And so that's, like I said, it's a character flaw of almost every person I sing. So it's always something I look to. I mean, look at Don José. Look at him. I mean, obviously a really insecure, flawed human being who's killed somebody before the opera even started. We always forget to talk about the fact that he's a murderer before the opera started.
She was a bitch anyway. So.
Yeah, but he's mentally unstable and insecure. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. He doesn't realize that he's holding on too tight to somebody who's going to push them away if you do that. He just doesn't get all that, He doesn't understand. But me knowing that it helps me. It helps me to dive further into that part of the character and try and show that as much as possible. But yeah, roles I haven't been cast in that I would like to do. I haven't been cast in Tannhäuser. I think that would be something that would be interesting. Lohengrin. So those Wagner roles at Parsifal, I've had offers for some of them. I have an offer for Siegmund in the future, but I don't, who knows if it'll happen based on the cost of doing a new ring. So yeah, there are tons of roles. There's also a ton of Verismo roles I'd like to dive into that are never done, but are hard to stage. They're a challenge to stage. Another opera, a French opera that would go along the same lines of Samson vocally, but a little bit harder, would be La Juive. Doing something like that.
I don't think I've heard of it. I don't think I'm familiar with it. I have to be honest.
It's beautiful music and severely challenging, and it's just not performed very often. It'd be something that I would like to look into. Maybe I loved doing, for instance, Heliana, which is never done, and that was a great piece. I mean, I think everybody should be hearing Heliana because musically speaking, is stunning, just stunning music. So complex, and Korngold's, movie atmosphere, but also within the opera, it's definitely a real Straussian tour de force almost in the style. It really takes a good cast. You need 3 solid lead singers for that, but even the subsidiary roles are challenging. So, it's a beast, but I think if it could be found to be staged in the right way, in an exciting way, even with a classical production done at somewhere like the Met or it would be worth it. You know, it's a piece that doesn't get enough attention. And of course, there's new operas being written still today, every day. You never know. I mean, not all the big how many new operas were written in 1900s? Tons that just aren't performed today. And so nowadays we have less patience with that too. You know, new operas aren't always going to be a hit, but casting has to be based on the talent and ability first, I think.
Of course it has.
And then you try and work from there. But like there has to be a little bit of an expansion of reality in those moments. You have to be able to go with it a little bit. And of course, culturally, we can try and make changes as we go. I hope we can do that. I mean, I always hope for the betterment of society. But it's not going to happen by bullying what we came from. You know, we have to acknowledge where we came from as a society, yes, and in order to move forward. And I think classical art forms like opera, but also classical art in general is one of the most amazing lessons in history. You're going to see a lot of what we used to think was okay, and now we know it's not. Yes. But that's okay. That's why art is that's why we're still doing pieces from 400 years ago. You know, that's why we're still performing them. Not just because the music's beautiful, but because that's our job as artists.
Yes.
I don't like playing Pinkerton. Brian Jay doesn't enjoy playing Pinkerton. I don't like being that guy. Of course
it must be a hard role to play, really and truly, because
not really. You want to know why? When you're doing a character like Pinkerton, everything's laid out for you. He's ignorant. He's not intentionally a jerk. He just doesn't know he's a jerk. He doesn't realize that what he's doing is wrong. So when you're playing a character like that, you're just making a huge mistake. You just don't know it the whole time. It comes down to very simple human behavior, actually, in the end. You know, it's not as complex as you think. In reality, like, he just doesn't understand the flaws of his character yet. Maybe in 20 years, if there was a sequel, you'd say, oh God, look at how much he learned about himself. Look about what happened based on the fact that she kills herself at the end. Like, does that change him? Yeah. Nobody cares about Pinkerton, of course. Like, as a person, and especially audiences today, I get booed on stage even if I give a great performance. But I don't really do the role anymore. But again, you know, Othello kills.
You had a great review, if I remember rightly. You shared something, and I reviewed Freddie in the role, and I said pretty much the same thing, that Pinkerton's a very hard character to have any sympathy with or to like, and yet he managed to, in
the final aria, at least.
In the final aria, he managed to convey a real sense of shame and
guilt,
despair and guilt at really what he'd done. And I know that reviewers have commented on your performance as well. You managed to convey that. And
thank God for that tenor. Thank God for the tenor who demanded an aria from Puccini, huh?
Because exactly. Otherwise, yeah. And you're talking about both. I mean, when Freddie did it, there were a few little hisses and boos, but it was purely for comedic effects. I saw James Valenti do the role.
Yeah.
Crikey. Must be, I'm going to say 15 years ago. But wow, he did get booed, and he took a very short curtain bow and stepped back. He really, really did get booed.
I laugh at the audience when they do it. I'm just like, oh yeah, I understand. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. You know, but ironically, I could sing Othello. I could kill my wife for a reason. Well, first of all, there's no good reason to kill somebody like that, first of all. Secondly, even if there was a good reason, like even if her cheating on him was a good reason, is that okay? And I wouldn't get booed after I sing that opera, but I can do Pinkerton, just be stupid and ignorant and cause a chain reaction that he didn't know would happen. I mean, he didn't ask her to kill herself, obviously. He didn't know that. He probably didn't know that would happen. But, but he'll get booed at the end of an opera. And I didn't kill anybody. It's like, so where are we? Our judgment of these characters from an audience perspective is fascinating to me. We will forgive. We'll forgive Don Jose at the end of an opera, but we won't forgive Pinkerton. It actually doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
but it's fascinating. And that's what makes art so worth doing. And that's why this art form is so worth doing, is because
Yeah.
audiences are allowed to feel what they want to feel. And they should.
Yeah.
We don't get up there again, we don't get up there for them to love every aspect of, I mean, we would love for them to love us as singers and actors and portrayers of these characters, but we want them to feel whatever they're supposed to feel, whatever they want to feel.
Yes.
That's our job.
My friend, I've had absolutely fantastic time speaking with you. I could speak with you all night. I've somehow got to go through this and put together some cohesive, great thing that works for you.
Well, it was awesome talking to you, Mike.
And you, my friend. And we'll do it again. And I promise I will definitely catch up with you at the Best in June. Whether I will review that performance or not, I do not know. Someone definitely will from Opera Wire. But I hope it's me. And I look forward to it. And let's have a beer and a good laugh. Give my love to Jenna. God bless, my friend. Take care. Keep strong. Keep healthy. Stretch the back. You have to. Seriously. It was on my list to do. I know that you'd really screwed your back up. You have to stretch it. And I hate yoga, all that namaste, shavasana shit. But I had for a long time my hip, then it went down to my knee, then it went down to my Achilles, then it went down to the arch of my foot, something called plantar fasciitis.
Fasciitis,
bloody painful. And I cured it purely from some yoga stretches. You have to stretch, especially big guys like us, because
I am so with you. I'm all over it. That's my new goal in life, is to stretch twice a day.
Got to do it. Yeah.
Yoga, here we come.
God bless, my friend. Take care. Look after yourself.
Will do. Bye-bye now.
Take care, Brian. God bless.